All right. So, and that's important to say, and that I chose this topic because, as some of you may or may not know, I have a survey in SurveyMonkey that few people they responded, and they ended up sending few suggestions for myself to for future topics. And I thank you guys very much for your contribution. I actually going to paste the link in YouTube and Facebook. So if you want to, you're more than welcome to fill that survey. It's just one question. Do you have a topic or a subject that you would like me to cover in future lives or videos? And then I'll have a look at the responses. And today's topic was because a lot of people they asked the question, how can I get a job as an international student? So because many people were asking that same question, I then chose to talk about this topic, and I thank you guys very much for your contribution. So if you those in Instagram, sorry I don't have the link in Instagram, but if you go to my YouTube or Facebook, uh, Engineers in Australia, you will find the link in the comments there. All right, so the first topic would be what to include in my CV. So that's a very common question and a very important topic to talk about. As you know, and I spoke already in this live session a few times, your CV needs to be very customized. So you are an international student. There's no way that you will run away from that situation. And as an international student, majority of you guys will be able to just work 20 hours a week. That is usually what majority of international students they can work. Obviously, we're talking about when you are working. I believe that at least in my time, when you are on holidays, you can actually work full time. I don't know how it is today, but let's say that you can just work 20 hours. So you need to include in your CV that, and you gotta be open and honest. You gotta put in your CV that you can just work part time. You can work 20 hours a week. You have an international student visa, and because companies, if they are asking for a full-time person, and if you apply for a full-time position, knowing that you can just work part-time, the company is not going to appreciate that because nowadays, because of the economic situation in Australia, every time that companies they advertise a position, they ended up getting a lot of candidates, a lot of applicants. So if you are applying for a permanent position full time and you can just work part time, you actually wasting the recruiter's time or the company's time, and that's not good. So I certainly encourage you guys to include in your CV that you can work just 20 hours a week, that you can just work part time. And as an international student, and majority of you guys probably like me, you came to Australia with a good work experience. At least majority of you guys. So just because you are an international student, it doesn't really mean that you don't have experience, that you don't have skills, that you don't have capabilities. So it's really important for you to include in your CV your main points, your main skills. And as an engineer, you certainly have skills, engineering skills. You may have some project management skills. Some of you guys were already managers, like I was back in Brazil when I came here. So you have HR skills, you have managerial skills. And in your professional profile, it's really important for you to highlight those skills as well. And what else you should include in your CV? As an international student, but if you have experience, you should include your main achievements. The companies, they are after what a person can bring as a result. So even though you may be applying for a part-time position, you could be applying for a graduate engineer or entry-level engineer position, or even not an engineer position, because I'm talking about engineering job. An engineering job may not mean an engineer job. So it's really important to understand that an engineering job is different from a job as an engineer. And that's really important because a lot of international students, they can get a job in engineering working as another thing, working as a project manager assistant. They can work as a draftsperson. They can work as an assistant engineer. They can work as a project management support officer. They can work as an engineering officer. So not necessarily as an engineer, but that's a very good start. It's important thing in Australia to have work experience and to have Australian work experience. Yeah, I know. How can you get Australian work experience if nobody gives you an opportunity? So, and that's why it's important for sometimes you try to open and broaden your search, not just for a job as an engineer, but a job as probably a role that is the support of an engineer. Because it's really important for you to get your foot into the company, into the engineering company. And then you can start doing other types of work. And then once you are there, people then will realize that you are an engineer. Perhaps you have already validated your qualification. And then once you are there, working as, let's say, a support person of an engineering project, your boss or your team, they'll realize that you are an engineer, you have much more capacity, much more capabilities and skills. So it's really important for you to open up the range of jobs that you're going to apply. And where to search for jobs. That's another topic that I said that I was going to talk about. And where to search for jobs. Obviously, we know the common websites like seek.com.au, smart jobs let's say here in Queensland. If you are after a government job, you can search for smartjobs.qld.gov.au. Is a Queensland government job advertisement website. And then also you have indeed.com.au. So all of those sites you can search for jobs. But the important thing is when you are searching for the jobs, and as I mentioned before, if you can work just part-time, it's really important for you to select in your search those ones as a part-time job. You may think, oh yeah, Gerson, but nowadays it's very difficult. Nobody is looking for a part-time job. Perhaps a few years ago was more difficult, but nowadays there are few things that changed in the job market. One is one thing called flexible work arrangement, FWA, which part of the flexible work arrangement you have, for example, working from home. Obviously, that's a very obvious one, especially in these times of COVID. There is telecommuting. You can work in a different office of the company. But also there is part-time agreements. And there's a lot of people, both male and female, that they have family commitments. And more, there's a lot of employees that they used to be full-time employees, but then because situations have changed, and let's say that now they've got a young family, they've got kids or they've got young kids, and let's say that the wife is working, and then the wife cannot work part-time, let's say, and then the husband uh, has the ability to work part-time. And in this case, I bet with you that the husband would apply for a flexible work arrangement where a part-time job is available. At work, I've got many cases of some of my employees there that they are working part-time. So they work 2 or 3 days a week. But then the company still have the need for somebody. Well, they need the full-time job, but then they've got one person that is working 2 days a week. 2 days a week in one week and 3 days a week in the next week. So in the fortnight, they're working 5 days. But the fortnight has 10 days. So they still have the need to employ probably another part-time worker or engineer or person to work the other 5 days. So more and more and more, the companies are now recruiting another part-time worker to fulfill the need of a full-time role. So you will be surprised if you tick part-time job in your search. You will be surprised of how many part-time jobs now they are available in the market. So, and that narrows your search down to what you can work. Because if you apply for a full-time job and then the company likes your resume and then talks to you and finds out that you can just work part-time, it's not going to be good for you. Because as I said before, they will think that you're just wasting their time. So really important, try to search for jobs ticking the part-time. Obviously, try to increase the range of the roles that you are searching for, not just for engineers, but you can use like a project management support officer, project officer, assistant engineer, even costing. There's a lot of engineers that they love costing and finances. So there's a title called a project costing officer that you can start working costing a project and help the finances of the project, and then later on you can perhaps be promoted and apply for an engineer job once you are in the company. The other topic, and before I forget, I want to also share in the comments the link for those ones that are interested to participate in my free workshop. For those that don't know, or some of you may know, every 2 or 3 months I promote a free validation workshop. So it's a workshop where usually it's 1 week full of contents, where then I teach you guys and I explain the whole validation process. If you are interested to validate your engineering qualification here in Australia, during this week I have live sessions, I've got live webinars, I've got recorded videos where I explain the whole process, and in just 1 week you will understand the whole process. So I put in the comments in Facebook and YouTube. And in Instagram, if you're interested, you can go to my bio, and there's a link in my bio. It will open up a registration page. You just need to input your email, and then you submit your request. You will receive 2 emails, at least 1 email, which is a confirmation of your registration. And the dates are not confirmed yet, but I'm thinking that I'm going to promote this free workshop towards the end of November. So end of this month, I'll probably going to promote. And when I confirm the dates I'm going to send by email. So it's very, very important once you register to the workshop that you save my name and my email address in your contacts and mark as favorites or VIP. so they don't really go to the junk mailbox. But one thing for sure, once you click the button to submit your registration, you will receive my email. If you didn't, it's because the email is already sitting in your junk mailbox. So just check your junk mailbox so you don't really miss out the free workshop. All right, I've got some questions here. I'll read and then I'll continue with the content. Levi, he's asking, probably, sorry, I asked the question what the blockage is to get a job as an international student, and Levi said in YouTube, probably the main difficulties, they are limitation of working hours and local experience. Yeah, that's certainly the major complaints that I hear, Levi, of people, that you can obviously just work 20 hours. And I strongly encourage you guys to respect the 20 hours. Because if you are here in Australia trying to validate your qualification as an engineer, it's probably because you have plans for future migration as an engineer in Australia. Do you have that objective? So put in the comments. Do you have this desire? Yeah, say yes if you have. Do you have the desire to migrate to Australia as a permanent resident and later on become a citizen? Which was pretty much my journey. I validated my qualification back in 2005 and 6. I've applied for my independent skilled migration permanent visa, and I got my permanent visa in 2008, and I got my citizenship in 2009. Is it something that you're really after? Is this your main objective? Because the validation process, I keep saying that the validation process is just a step for you to get your permanent residency or your citizenship. The ultimate objective, it's probably for you to become a citizen here in Australia. Levi is saying yes. Yeah, well done, Levi. I think that's a very, very good objective. Jasper in Facebook is saying yes. Ivinha is saying yes. And Tiago, yeah, he's saying he recommends it. Thanks, Tiago, and I hope that you enjoying my mentoring program. Yes, and as I keep saying, guys, I am Brazilian, and I'm very proud of my country. I love my country. I did everything I could in my country to help the society. As some of you know or may not know, I worked in the education department of my state for 4 years. And for 4 years, I was trying to improve the education, and I work obviously in the public education system. And I work very hard to help my state, Paraná state, to help the education to improve. But it was so hard, but so difficult. And there's so many things that were outside of my control that I thought I have to try to put my effort in some way that I can really make a difference. And I was very lucky that my wife, she said that she was going to come to Australia, and we came in 2005, and we became then citizens, etc. And nowadays I work in the construction industry, infrastructure industry, and I'm very happy that I can make a difference. I can contribute to the engineering profession here in Australia. So in this workshop that's going to happen end of November, I hope that information that I'm going to share with you guys, I will be able to help you in your objective to validate obviously your qualification here in Australia, and then further down the track with the validation already done, you can then apply for a future permanent residency. All right, the next topic that I said that I was going to talk about is the key points to put in your cover letter. And I had already a few live sessions about cover letter. I made I may probably do another one because the audience is always different. So the live session that I talked about the cover letter some time ago may not be the same audience today. And in my job nowadays, I'm operations manager of a construction company. And as the operations manager there, I've got 250 employees in the business. And I recruit a lot of engineers and I recruit a lot of project managers. And I lost count already the number of cover letters and the resumes and the applications that are already assessed. Probably in the 500s. There's a lot. Just in the last recruitment process that I recruited a senior project manager, a civil engineer, I received more than 70 applications, 70 applications. So that was just one recruitment process in this year. And it's been more than 10 years that I am recruiting engineers and project managers for the company as part of my job. So I can see a lot of issues, a lot of mistakes that engineers they include or they don't include in their cover letter. And I can recall when I was an international student back in 2005 and 6, what were the important things that I probably didn't include when I was trying to get a job. So the key points in your cover letter. First, the cover letter needs to be tailored, customized to the position that you are applying for. That's a very common mistake because I see a lot of applicants that they pretty much use the same cover letter to every single position that they apply for. Doesn't matter if it is for an engineer, doesn't matter if it is for a project officer, doesn't matter if it is for a project manager, doesn't matter if it is infrastructure, doesn't matter if it's a building, doesn't matter if it's a mechanical engineer. They pretty much try to make a general cover letter. And a general cover letter pretty much has got one paragraph saying that I am a very motivated and enthusiastic engineer, and I've got these capabilities, and I would love an opportunity to discuss in more details my contributions to the company in an interview. So pretty much candidates just asking, please interview me and I'll tell you what am I capable for. And I can tell you this cover letter is not going anywhere. When I read this cover letter, and not just me, but recruitment panel members, when we read that type of cover letter, that goes straight to the bin. So the cover letter needs to be very specific to the position that you are applying for. And usually positions, they have what they call a role description, RD, or position description, where it will have the selection criteria or the key competencies. And the cover letter needs to cover every single aspects of those competencies, usually between 5 and 7 competencies, and you need to address each competency, give practical examples, give the results that you have achieved. As an international student, obviously it's a little bit of an issue because some people, they don't really have a lot of experience, but if you have some experience, obviously you can describe in your examples. And obviously if you don't really have a lot of experience, you're probably not going to apply for the higher level positions. You're going to apply, let's say, for a graduate engineer position or for a project support officer. And for those positions, the requirements are going to be less as well. So, but you got to make sure that you put your capabilities and your skills and your abilities addressing the key competencies. So that's really, really important. And you got to be open about your visa status. I know that, yeah, Jerson, but if I put that I am an international student, they're not going to even have a look at my resume. you could be wrong, especially if you are applying for a part-time position. Let's say if I am looking for a part-time position, and if I get a resume from an international student, maybe because it's me, I used to be an international student, so I know that there's a lot of international students with a lot of good potential. So I would certainly have a look. Unless the company has a policy, and unfortunately, a lot of companies, they have a policy that they just going to recruit if you are a permanent resident or if you are a citizen. But I can tell you, this requirement usually is for a full-time permanent position. And there are a lot of positions that they are part-time and temporary. Why temporary? Well, that's from a definition of a project. So what is the definition of a project? Do you guys remember when you guys studied project management? What is the definition of a project in terms of time? Put in the comments. Let's see. Let's have a little bit of a review of project management. What do you remember about time related? That is the definition of a project. And while you guys think about it, I'll have a look at some of the other questions. I've got a lot of comments here in Facebook, and I'll have a look here. Someone was saying, there's a question here. Ximena, thanks Ximena for your question. She's saying, but what about the option of work with ABN as a consultant service, for example? Yeah, that's a good question, Ximena. You just gotta be careful that even though you may have an ABN, if you have a visa condition that you can just work 20 hours a week, even though you have ABN, because the ABN is the way is your employment engagement. Instead of you being employed as an employee, a casual, a temporary, or a permanent, you are being engaged as a company. You're providing a service. But nevertheless, you still just got a permission to work 20 hours. Oh yeah, Jerson, but nobody's going to know how many hours I worked. Well, depends. Even though you could be providing ABN, the company, if the immigration goes to the company and asks, what about Ximena? Yeah, Ximena, we engage her as a consultant. All right. So as a consultant, you're probably going to charge per hour. And you will give them an invoice charging them for like, I don't know how many hours a day or how many hours a week or how many hours a month. And if you worked more than 20 hours a week, it will probably going to be in your invoices. And then you could be in trouble with the immigration department if somebody kind of adopts you in, and then the immigration department goes to the company and asks, I want to see the invoices from Ximena. And then they'll give the invoices, and then it shows that you're working 30, 40 hours a week. So you could be in trouble. So it's up to you. You guys do whatever you want, but you just got to make sure that you understand what could be the consequences. The other question that I got here, Jasper, I'm just here. I'm just new here, sir. How to register? Yeah, I sent in there. Brian, he asked a very good question in Facebook. He's asked the question, do recruiters read first the cover letter and then the resume? I'll tell you, Brian, what I do as a recruiter and as a panel member. And I usually the chair of the panel when I am recruiting for especially the more senior engineers and project managers. What I do, I read the cover letter first. And why do I do that? And majority of recruitment companies, they read the cover letter first. Because the cover letter is the document that's going to be addressing the key competencies and the selection criteria. And usually the position description is very clear. It says at the section, in one section of the position description, there's a section called How to Apply. And then in this How to Apply, usually it says, please send us a resume with maximum of 2 pages or 3 pages, whatever pages. And it says that send a cover letter addressing the key competencies with no more than 2 pages, for example. So there's a condition. You gotta send the resume and the cover letter. And the cover letter is the one that is addressing the key competencies or the selection criteria. And that's why majority of recruiters, at least the ones that I know and the ones that I work with, we always read the cover letter first. If the cover letter is not addressing competencies, there's a big chance that we're not going even to look at the resume. Because the resume, what is the resume? Resume is what is your qualification, your professional profile, and the places that you worked, and the things that you did. But it will be more, let's say, there will be some information that's not really related to the key competencies. So that's why it's important. And because resumes, they could have 3, 4, 5 pages. And the cover letter usually is just 2 pages. The cover letter is more straight to the point. So I usually read the cover letter. If the cover letter interests me, then I'll check the resume. If the cover letter is not interesting, if the cover letter did not address the key competencies, usually, especially when I have 70 applicants, I usually don't really read with a lot of attention the resume. If the cover letter instigates a little bit of interest but didn't address the competencies, I may look at the resume to see if I can extract some information from the resume. But extracting information from the resume, it's very difficult because it's a lot of reading, and if you have 70 applicants, you're probably restricted of time as well. So I really would advise you guys to prepare a very good cover letter, because that's usually where recruiters, they pay a lot of attention. And if you can instigate interest from the cover letter, recruiters usually will have a good look at the resume. The other question that Brian asked was, could it be a good idea to have a general cover letter and customize it for each job application? Yeah, you can do that. You can probably do the introduction and in the end and the conclusion pretty much the same, and then customize a little bit. But then the body of the letter needs to be customized according to the key competencies or the key selection criteria. And positions, they usually will have different selection criteria. They're usually going to have different key competencies. So using the same body is not a good idea. You need to spend time to put together your cover letter and your resume. If you have a generic one, and I've seen many people, they prepare a generic cover letter and resume. Some people, there are companies, well, and that's obviously up to each one, but there are companies I know that you pay some money and then they send your resume and your cover letter to 1,000 job opportunities. And then they say, oh yeah, Jerison, I've applied for more than 1,000 job opportunities and I never got a phone call. Well, if you did like that, if you did just a generic cover letter and a generic resume, and you paid somebody to send 1,000 and apply for 1,000 jobs with that generic cover letter and resume, obviously you're not going to get anything, because recruiters, they know when it's generic and they're not going to call you. So it's just a waste of time and waste of money. And if you expect that a panel member is going to spend at least 15 minutes reading your application and trying to match your cover letter with the selection criteria, If the panel member is going to spend 15 minutes, why cannot you spend half an hour to write a proper cover letter and to write a proper resume? So it's up to you. If you spend 5 minutes, the quality will be a 5 minutes effort. If you spend 30 minutes, the quality will be a 30 minutes effort. So which one do you think is going to be better? And recruiters, because of, as I said, a lot of engineers and a lot of supply in the market, recruiters are being very strict. If it is a rubbish application, and that's probably a coincidence, but it goes to the rubbish. If it is a good quality application, it will deserve a second look. Let's have a look here. All right. So checking Instagram. No really questions in Instagram. Okay, good. All right. And then the other topic that I mentioned that I was going to talk today, and it's already 9:21. Oh, it's nearly 45 minutes. Sorry, guys. The types of job to apply. I already covered a little bit. So as I said before, I would apply for types of job, not just for engineer, because it could be a little bit more difficult to get in, especially if you are an international student. But I would apply for jobs that perhaps they are support, project support officer, an assistant project engineer, an assistant engineer, a project costing officer, engineering drafts person, if you did the course, of course, and if you know how to deal with AutoCAD and etc. But the types of job, certainly part-time and temporary. And why temporary? You guys didn't really answer about the project management question about the time. But remember that when you studied project management, one of the characteristics of a project and the definition is a project has a start and an end date. So one thing that is continuous, it's not a project. A project has a start and has a finish. And because a project has a start and a finish, companies, they could be recruiting professionals for the project. And if a project has a start and a finish, they very unlikely going to employ somebody permanently. And we do this quite a lot. We've got a lot of projects that they have a start and a finish. And for that, we recruit temporary employees. We recruit temporary workers. We recruit casuals. So if you are limited because of your visa, because your visa is not a permanent, an international student is a temporary visa, and you can just work 20 hours a week, for example. But if you search for a job where the period of employment is when you have your visa, you can argue that you are eligible for that position because you have a valid visa that you can work 20 hours a week. And if they are recruiting, obviously temporary and part-time, as long as obviously it matches with your schedule, with the classes and everything else, you have probably better chances to get a job instead of you applying for a permanent full-time position. As I said, permanent full-time positions, usually the companies will ask you to have a permanent residency or being a citizen or be a New Zealander, etc., etc. Or you have graduate visa or a sponsor visa, working rights to work full-time and permanently. And why is that? Because to recruit somebody, it costs the company a lot of money. It costs usually about $25,000 for a company to pay for a recruitment company to employ somebody. And If the company is paying $25,000 to a recruitment company to recruit somebody, they want this somebody to be a long-term employee, because you already spent $25,000 just to hire somebody. And you're not going to pay $25,000 to recruit somebody to work just 6 months or 3 months. So for the temporary positions, perhaps their HR department, they advertise in those job-seeking websites, and they don't need to recruit a recruitment company. So it's really important for you to apply for a temporary part-time job. All right. Any other particular question? Levi is asking, do you have a cover letter model to suggest? Yeah, that's a very good question, Levi. And you can probably, if you Google cover letter even in YouTube and Google, you will find lots of templates. The important thing is not really the template. The important thing is for you to understand the principle. And the principle is that the introduction, it needs to create some attention from the reader, so the reader can then read the first paragraph, get impressed with your professional profile, and then be curious how you are addressing the key competencies. But the really secret is for you to address the key competencies. For example, let's say that a job description has one of the selection criteria or key competencies as a project management. Project management is one of the selection criteria. So you need to say something in the lines of, I can demonstrate my competency in this selection criteria when I delivered a project, building whatever or manufacturing whatever, in the project XXX, where the project value was, let's say, $5 million, and with this objective here, etc. And the main challenges that I had during the delivery was about HR or time or technical, whatever, etc. And I used my knowledge in project management. I applied the 10 knowledge areas according to PMBOK. And to manage the scope, I did this. To manage time, I did this. To manage cost, I did that, etc., etc. Write a good paragraph, maybe 10 or 15 lines about that project, demonstrating and giving an example how you have addressed that competency. So really, really important. Minimize the introduction and the conclusion, and spend a good 10 lines in the paragraph to address that competency, because it will really impress the panel members. So unfortunately, I don't really have a model, but I may do another live session just talking about cover letter and resume. Let's see here. And also I would like to just remind you guys, I'm going to paste another link in Facebook and YouTube, where I have my engineering qualification validation group in Telegram. So for those that don't know, Telegram is like WhatsApp, and but Telegram is much better. It doesn't really have an algorithm, and every time that I send a message in my group, I am sure that everybody gets the message. You decide if you want to open or not. So this link that I sent in YouTube and Facebook, those are the links. Well, that is the link for you to join my group in Telegram. I've got today, I'm just going to check how many members I've got in my group, because I've got quite a few. I've got currently, just going to double check, where is that? Where's my group in Telegram? No, I think I've got 737 members in my engineering qualification validation group. So you just need to download the app, Telegram app, and then when you click on that link, you will join my group. In that group, you can ask questions. You can. I usually post some job opportunities there as well, and updates about the validation workshop. I include in that as well. I think I got another question in YouTube. Yeah, Roberto is asking, is it possible to work as a volunteer for a short period to get some experiences and network? Does the Australian legislation allow this? Yeah, that's a very good question, Roberto. The Australian legislation does allow that, but it will depend on the company's policy. And the main issue that I see here, and I see a lot of comments of, in Facebook groups, they say, yes, I arrived in Australia, I've got a lot of experience in this, and I would like to work as a volunteer so I can get some Australian experience. So looks all good and looks certainly very interesting. But what happens in the Australian companies and Australian market is all about workplace health and safety. And if you look at the legislation in the workplace health and safety legislation 2011, and probably that's a good legislation for you guys to read. The legislation says that whoever is working for the company is solely responsible for that. And volunteers, even if you are working as a volunteer, the company is still responsible. Obviously, you are responsible for your own safety, but something happens with you when you are working as a volunteer in that company, the company will be in trouble. But the companies, they usually get volunteers. But those volunteers, usually they are, let's say, an intern or internship. They usually attached to university. They usually linked to the TAFE. They usually linked to the school, and they have insurance. They have all of the paperwork that is necessary to guarantee at least a little bit the legal liability. What scares the company about volunteers is about legal liability. If you are working as a volunteer and if you have an injury which was caused by the work or volunteer work that you were doing, the company could be liable, and that could cost a lot of money to the company. So a lot of companies, they don't really get volunteers because they know that they carry a big liability. So volunteers, you could be an internship. There are companies actually that they work with internship. Obviously, you got to pay these companies a fee, and then these companies, they will arrange everything, insurance, and they probably have the internship opportunity as well. But you will be covered by insurance and everything else. So for you to just kind of knock on a company's door and say, hey, I'm Roberto, I am an engineer. What sort of engineer are you, Roberto? In YouTube, are you a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer? Are you willing to work on a site or going to work in a factory or whatever? If you knock on a company door and say, I'm willing to work as a volunteer, the company will probably going to say, yeah, thank you very much for your offer, but they're going to be polite and they're not going to be rude. But really, if they say, sorry, but we don't really employ volunteers, etc., etc., what they really want to say is that, sorry, but you are a very potential liability for us. So yeah, civil, especially civil. If you are on a construction site, construction sites here, they obviously anywhere else in the world, they're very dangerous, and you can be badly injured. And if you are, especially in some states in Australia, I'm probably running a little bit away from the topic, but in Queensland, for example, the workplace health and safety legislation here in Queensland, there is an offense that's called manslaughter, industrial manslaughter, which is if somebody gets seriously injured or dies, some people in the company, they can go to jail, they can have to pay fines because they could be convicted by industrial manslaughter. And this is pretty much killing without intention. So for those that Brazilians is homicídio culposo, where you kill people without the intention, but it is a manslaughter charge. So for that reason, companies, if you're not fully insured, if you don't really have a good understanding about safety, they're probably not going to employ you. All right, let me check. Any other question? No? It's all good? Yeah, 1 hour here. So I really would like to thank you guys for your participation and your question. And I will be here next Sunday, 8:30 p.m. Brisbane time, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you have any suggestion for future topics for these live sessions or even videos that I record, I'll paste again the SurveyMonkey link in Facebook and YouTube, and you can just click in that and then answer the survey, and then I'll be more than happy to kind of cover in next sessions. So thank you very much, and if you haven't registered to the free workshop that's going to happen end of this month, please do so. I'll see you then. Bye bye. See ya.